used to say, if you're a rock climber, you don't need a shrink. You don't need a therapist, because when you're climbing, the past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. You're just in the present. All of that background noise in your head is blown away. And you're focused. And it made sense to me in a world that maybe mirrors what's happening right now. And for me, climbing became a fountainhead, became a way to make sense of the world.
Alex, I'm curious, other than 8A, how much news do you consume?
Not that much, but I do read the New York Times morning email thing every morning. So I basically get a sense of the headlines, then occasionally I'll click on something to like read deeper. But I try not to read that much news because there's kind of a limitless barrage of stuff getting thrown at you all the time.
This last year, between all the executive orders, emergencies being declared when there aren't really emergencies, it's kind of hard to keep track. Here's one bit of good news that I think most climbers don't even know, but in January of 2025, Congress, in a bipartisan move, saved climbing in national parks and national forests, 30% of the total climbing routes in the U.S.
Yeah, the Park Act. Yeah, it's part of the bigger bipartisan Explore Act, which did all kinds of things to help people getting outside and protect access to public lands.
Yeah.
You know, I actually did an event with my local congresswoman to talk about the Explore Act.
The truth of it is, like, I don't think most climbers, or really like just the smallest margin of climbers, even knew that we almost lost climbing in wilderness and in many national parks in 2023 and 2024. Like that almost happened. Climbing at Joshua Tree, climbing in Black Canyon, like climbing in a lot of these places, they looked at it and they're like, we're going to remove fixed anchors, which basically means you can't get off a route, or, you know, there's like limited belays. Like,
yeah,
it was pretty extreme. And I don't think like a lot of people even caught that.
No, I think that's totally off most people's radar. But I mean, in a way, we never really know all the bullets that we dodge. You know, it's like that's the kind of thing. And that's kind of why you support organizations like the Access Fund, because you don't really have to want to know about all the bullets that you're dodging. You just want to keep going out and going climbing.
Yeah. And now, I mean, after like January 2025, every route created before then is protected. It gets to remain no matter what. And that's pretty freaking rad.
We get that climbing is a kind of escape, but this year has really shown that nothing is immune to politics. And we've been seeing politicians try to sell off millions of acres of public land to the highest bidders. And
we watched also as millions of Americans from the outdoor world, people from all across the political spectrum, hunters, climbers, anglers, mountain bikers, people who just like being outside, they all lit up Congress and successfully got the public land sell-off removed from the budget bill.
We've also seen the current administration rescind the roadless rule, which potentially opens up tons of public land back up to logging and mining. Congress has also mandated new oil and gas leasing at a scale we haven't seen, even while we're experiencing another of the hottest years on record. And the U.S. is already producing more oil and gas than Russia or Saudi Arabia. It's like we're already the biggest oil producer in the world. It's like, do we need to drill more on public lands? And all the cuts to the National Park Service, all the dodge cuts, can we call them dodgy? All the dodgy cuts to the, it's like, it's easy to be overwhelmed and to think, I'm just a climber, what can I do?
We promise today we are not going to go through every single bad thing or threat facing our public lands. But we are going to challenge that thought of I'm just a climber, because the truth is our community has people who have stepped into challenges repeatedly, who've taken their love for this sport, and they've kind of treated it almost like a duty that has turned them into advocates. They've rolled up their sleeves and got to work helping create the world they want to see.
And that's infectious. So Fitz, who are we talking to today?
Well, I think it's safe to say that we have the hardest climbing U.S. senator of all time. I don't think we've had a senator on the show, let alone the hardest climbing senator.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of U.S. senators on climbing gold.
I know. And a climbing lifer who stepped out of a career in tech to lead the effort to protect America's climbing for generations to come. Actions both big and small can lead to incredible things.
I'm Alex Honnold.
I'm Fitz Cahall.
This is Climbing Gold.
I was really drawn to the organization because my favorite crag index, where I learned to trad climb, almost got shut down back in 2009. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, what? This could happen? Like they could take away this thing that just feels like it's been there forever and will be there forever. And when Access Fund came together with a local climbing organization and bought it and saved it, I was just like, holy cow. I'm Heather Thorne. I'm executive director of the Access Fund. I've been climbing for 30 years and I've been like a consumer of climbing, and I felt like it was like time to do something and give back a little. So it's been awesome.
Maybe just explain the whole thing around Index a little more. Like what was the threat to Index and what did the Access Fund wind up doing?
Sure. So Index was part land, private land. Essentially, there's like a railroad that goes right across. Essentially, when you park and you like take the trail to the lower town wall, there's like a railroad track right there. And so this land was that was right where the railroad track was private. They were concerned that there was some sort of liability or something like that and just like shut it down. Like one day there were no trespassing signs on the trail. This was like before I was an advocate. So it was sort of like I just was for the first time aware that this could happen. And so there was actually somebody named Doug Walker who was really involved with the Washington Climbers Coalition and with the Access Fund, who was an avid climber, and he had become a climbing partner of mine. And I saw him kind of get group of folks together and say, like, we're going to fundraise for this. Like, we're going to do something. And they made these t-shirts. I love the t-shirt. It has a topo of the lower town wall. If you've climbed at Index, you know that it's known for being a little bit stiff.
Yeah, it's impossibly hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So the tagline is like, YDS is overrated. Anyway, I still have that shirt. I love it. So yeah, I was just like so psyched. And so they raised the money and they like bought the land and they like put a porta potty there and like there's a little sign, and it was amazing. You know, the model that we have is basically we started a fund. It's about $1 million fund. It's a revolving loan fund, and it's available for LCOs or anybody who really needs a loan, like on short order. And we're there to say like, hey, like we can give you a loan. We can make the down payment. Like, let's get this land quickly. Usually what happens is the LCO buys it. And then over years, you know, subsequent to that, they go and fundraise and then pay Access Fund back so that we can continue to use that fund for other purchases.
Yeah. What's an LCO?
Local climbing organization. So think about Southern Nevada Climbers Coalition, for example.
Oh, you went straight to home. What are some other examples of LCOs or local climbing organizations that people would know about? Like, what are some of the biggest ones? Yeah,
like Red River Gorge Climbers Coalition in the Red, or Boulder Climbing Community in Boulder. Southern Nevada, as you mentioned, SLCA is another one in Salt Lake City. Those are some of the larger ones.
And how many are there around the country?
About 150 total, and then there's about 122 that are affiliated with Access Fund. So one of the reasons we're able to do what we do is because LCOs are doing so much in local climbing areas. And so the way we think of it is like, there's no way we could accomplish what we can at a national level or even a regional level if we didn't have LCOs on the ground that are like, hey, there's this issue. Like we have an email address on our website that says, if you have an access issue, like email us at this address. And then we have a couple of folks in regions that are, you know, able to jump on those and start to consult with the LCO and figure out if there's something that we can do to help. But like, we wouldn't know about those things if the LCOs weren't like on the front lines letting us know. And similarly, if we have to go have a conversation with, you know, a legislator, like, you know, a Mark Udall, having people that are on the ground that can, you know, kind of let us know when there's an issue, and then we can build those relationships together with legislators. That's one of the reasons we're able to have the impact we have. We've been really fortunate to have amazing support from and partnerships with some of the leading climbing companies. Like Black Diamond has been an incredible supporter from our very beginning. There's this synergy, like the industry wouldn't be an industry if it didn't have a sport. More recently, we have a ton of support from movement, climbing gyms, and then from athletes. And so I think people that are able to see kind of that through line between the sport that they love, the experiences that they, you know, just treasure, and then the future, and they say, wow, gosh, back when I started climbing, the crag I used to go to looked like this. I've seen it degrade since then, or I've seen this closure over here. Holy cow, like there's something I need to do. And so I think as people get further along in their climbing careers, they start to see that trajectory and then start to see like, wait a minute, this is something that I need to invest in and support.
For me, growing up in Sacramento, one of my local sport climbing areas was Jailhouse, which is on private property. It's on somebody's ranch.
Oh, yeah.
And so for all the years I grew up, it was always hush hush. There's no topo. It's kind of secret. And there was like a gentleman's agreement with the landowner that if as long as people were discreet and kept it low key, we could cross the ranch and climb. So you're like, which is a pretty classic climbing scenario around the country where you're kind of like, oh, the landowner's cool, and like the three guys that bolted it are like fine, you know, are friends with the guy and bought him a beer, and so it's fine. But that's just not a totally sustainable approach to climbing access, because at some point, you know, the land. Anyway, so at some point, I think during the economic crisis 2008, basically the ranch owner was like upside down on his property and was like struggling for money, and there was talk of selling the ranch and basically turning into a development or something, and so that would lose access to the cliff. And so I think what wound up happening is that the Access Fund basically loaned him the money that he needed to get through his hard times. in exchange for a recreation easement, which allowed recreation, like explicitly allowed recreation legally on the property.
Yeah.
And so then actually they put a road in, they made a little gate. And so it's like a much more harmonious situation with the landowner now. But then the landowner paid the money back because it's a loan. And so the access fund basically didn't lose anything. We gained a recreation easement. Now there's a legitimate topo, there's legitimate access, climbers go there. It's all like on the up and up. And I was kind of like, man, I love win-win things like that. Where it's like, because it's not like the landowner wants to sell his ranch and turn it into a development, but he's upside down on some kind of loan and he just needs the money. And so I was kind of like, to me, that's the real beauty of the access fund, is when you get those win-win solutions where everybody's happy, everybody has access to the thing they love, you preserve the land in the way. I mean, it's kind of like an ideal situation, and obviously it doesn't always work out like that. But there are plenty of situations where it does, and I'm like, oh, and that is why we support the access fund.
Well, I mean, maybe to give a different example, this is not something that we've been directly involved with, but we have done a lot of work in the red, as you know. And, they recently had really difficult news about the closure of this area called the zoo. And I think, climbers were just totally like, how can the landowners close this place? And I think the cautionary tale there for climbers is that we can easily take things for granted. And sometimes, to your point, when there has either been a gentleman's agreement or if there's just been an absent landowner that hasn't really been paying attention and climbers have just climbed for years and years and years, one day, I think it was like the grandson of the landowner came out and took a look at the place and saw like people illegally camping there, and like the trails were totally eroded and there was all this bolting and there's chalk everywhere. And they were like, this isn't what we imagined when we thought it was okay to let climbers come through here. And they just like closed it down, like, no two words about it. And so, of course, there's conversations around how can we try to build bridges and try to support that landowner eventually to be able to try to bring back access. But it's probably going to take a long time. You can't just take these places for granted. They're not always necessarily going to be there.
But what do you see as the biggest threats to climbing right now? We'll be back with more after the break.
Alex, you were back in the valley this fall. You spent some time on the side of El Cap and on the side of Middle Cathedral. What is your sort of go-to comfort piece of clothing?
I just spent 6 days on the wall with Tommy climbing El Cap. And my evening routine that just screamed indulgent comfort, like this is beautiful, is I would take off my harness and my climbing pants and I would change into long johns and down like puffy pants and then just put a sling around my waist.
Yeah.
And then I put my big puffy on top. It's basically my Antarctic style puffy. And then you just feel like you're wearing a sleeping bag and you can just sit around on the ledge and just like watch the moon rise.
You are a California climber through and through.
Yeah. It was chilly though. Basically, I'm just using the advanced mountain kit. And actually, I found that it really made a difference because we were getting up way before sunrise because we wanted to be climbing as soon as it was light. And if you're trying to get out of your sleeping bag at 4:30 in the morning, you kind of want the big layers because you just want to feel totally warm. The North Face has you covered. Discover gear designed to take you to new heights at thenorthface.com.
Alex, what's one of your favorite parts about this time of year?
I think one of the really nice things this time of year is when we all sort of stay in bed longer, snuggle, and then spend more time in the kitchen making a tasty breakfast as a whole family. Like it's raining today, which is unusual in Vegas, and when it's raining and then you make pancakes, you're kind of like, oh, what a special day. It's just like, oh, this is a nice thing that we're all doing together. It kind of slows down the pace of the morning a little bit too, in a nice way. It's like we're going to do something together right now.
Yeah. Kodiak Cakes have a bunch of different mixes. Is there like a Honnold house favorite?
Yeah, we've been using the buttermilk flapjack mix, but honestly, we've actually tried all the different mixes and also the frozen waffles, and they're all pretty good. Whether it's a hearty breakfast or a quick granola bar on the go, Kodiak's delicious products are made with 100% whole grains and protein packed. Find Kodiak products at your local grocery store. They're the ones with the bear on the box. Learn more at kodiakcakes.com. What do you see as the biggest threats to climbing right now?
Part of it is bifurcated by geography. So in the east, in the southeast especially, there's a lot more private land. There's not as much, federal land. But in the west, in particular, you've got so many areas that are BLM land, Forest Service land, and then national park. And I think the big threat that we see right now is really around BLM land and monuments. I think folks are generally pretty aware that there has been a lot of talk about selling off, federal land. And, I think it was being seen as an opportunity to raise funds to balance the budget and to pay for tax cuts. And at the end of the day, I think because so many climbers and other recreationists, people that love public lands, weighed in and made their voices heard, the budget package does not include that sell-off piece. The initial set of properties that they were proposing to sell off did include some climbing areas in Nevada. It did include some climbing areas in Utah.
Which things in Nevada? Anything I know?
Urban Crag, I think it's called.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. I put up a root there.
Oh, what do you know?
Well, I freed a root there.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, a classic 13D, which I do not believe has had a second ascent. It was like some abandoned bolted thing, but it's so convenient, hence the name Urban Crag. It's like literally in town.
Right, exactly.
Though actually, that's the kind of thing that even if you sold that, I don't think anyone could develop it. Or like, I don't know, it's like literally a cliff in the middle of town. It's kind of a weird,
Interesting.
Like it's hard to imagine what somebody would do with it. And it's like currently a recreation area anyway. It's like it's what you'd call like an exclave. It's like it's a little piece of limestone completely surrounded by suburbia. So there's like homes on all sides of it, but there's just it's Lone Mountain. It's like this one little mountain sticking up in the middle of the town.
That is crazy.
But so it's kind of hard to imagine. I mean, other than somebody just fully like bulldozing the whole mountain and like turning it into, but it's like,
or just saying like, I want this as like my private mountain and I'm going to like close off access to it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine because that's a super popular mountain. I could see it turning into a little city park or something, but that's like kind of the same idea at that point.
Yeah.
But
the question is, if the people that are making the decisions are not actually aware of what's on the properties that they're selling. So like we went and did a bunch of GPS analysis to kind of overlay like where are their routes and where are these parcels. We actually had, volunteers from the local climbing organizations go out and bring their, GPS and actually say like, okay, what's the boundary of the land they're talking about selling and where do these routes exist? And so I think what we're trying to just say is like, we want to be able to have a conversation with these agencies before they make these proposals or Congress before they make these proposals. That is one of the biggest threats. I think the other one is there's this thing called the Antiquities Act. And the Antiquities Act was this act that was essentially created to allow a president to designate a piece of land to protect it in perpetuity. And this was sort of, back, I don't even know, like 100 years ago when this was created. And many of today's national parks actually started out as national monuments. So they were designated as a monument first and foremost. And then eventually through acts of Congress, they actually became a national park. And the idea when the Antiquities Act was created is that it should be a one-way avenue. The president should be able to designate and that it should not be something that can be undone. And so I think the thing that's been tricky, and we've seen this with Bears Ears, is that when Bears Ears was designated as a national monument, then there was a step, that was under the Obama administration, and then there was a step under the Trump administration to reduce the boundaries of it, and then it was sort of reinstated. And long story short, if every piece of public land that has been designated as a protected area can be undone and pieces sold off for, oh, there's like a little bit of copper there, or, oh, there's some uranium there, or, oh, there's maybe some oil and gas there, then what does that mean 25, 50, 100 years from now about these places? Can't fight for everything. We can't have a position on everything. But if we see something that sets a really dangerous precedent, then it's something we're going to fight for, to the point of actually being involved in a lawsuit if necessary.
Public lands are basically one of the most loved things in America. Like national parks, like every individual basically loves the outdoors, loves parks, loves nature, like those kinds of things, and enjoy wide bipartisan support in terms of polling and whatever else. So why is there such a move to sell public lands or to privatize public lands? And actually, and for that matter, I mean, I don't even know how to ask the question, but like, why is the vocabulary so complicated? Because I feel like part of it gets framed by representatives as like, this is a states' rights issue. And people are like, yeah, I support that. But then you're like, wait, but what they're really talking about is taking away your land.
Right.
And even that, where it's like the framing of public land versus federal land, because when people hear federal land, they think that like somebody in Washington is taking my land away. And you're like, no, that's your land.
Right.
If it's designated federal land, you actually have more say over it. I mean, can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what's the disconnect between the nomenclature and how, like, why is there so much policy around this despite the fact that it's so popular with the public?
I think, there are a lot of issues that politicians are always trying to, they're trying to find points of leverage to make progress on the thing that they think is going to be important for their constituents and, frankly, probably to get reelected, right? And so there are, various different, I'd say, politicians for whom they know that the idea of states' rights is really important to their constituency, or the idea of a balanced budget is really important to their constituency.
Though those constituents at the same time support public lands and support access to public lands, and it's like, and they love like going ATVing on like open land and whatever, and you're sort of like, well, when you sell that off, all of a sudden there are gates over that land and you can't do that anymore.
I mean, I think it gets a little bit to tragedy of the commons issues. So when you talk about these issues like a states' rights issue or a balanced budget issue, there are people that will they're one issue voters, right? or 2 or 3 issue voters. There are people that will vote for that issue because that to them is representative of this ideal that they have for how government should work. And then there's this assumption that that can coexist with this thing that they love, the public lands. It's like, oh, sure, like you can get rid of some staff from, I don't know, the NPS because, I don't know, they're like some bureaucrats out there, or there's some like scientists studying something that I don't really care about, whatever. It feels so kind of remote and abstract that it's just like, whatever, it's always been there, it's going to be there, like whatever. You kind of have to be able to think systemically to see how all of the pieces fit together that support the experience, that enable the experience that we derive so much from in the outdoors. And if you don't see all that and have exposure to that, it's probably easy to just be like, oh, I just want to go out and ride my ATV, or I just want to go out and go climb, or I just want to go out and go fish, or whatever, and not really understand why those other pieces that are those longer term investments in that place are actually important. I think the trick is, if we have always trusted the government to be stewards of the land first and foremost, if that is no longer the case, if the government is now looking at the multi-uses and is actually prioritizing extraction or sort of monetary value over sort of long-term conservation, which is sometimes what some of these moves look like, then it's really tricky to say, like, what is the right play?
So how does the Access Fund balance, though? You know, it's like we're all sort of anti-extraction, anti-exploiting public lands. At the same time, I mean, actually, I drive an electric car now, but still, you know, that's coming from minerals that are mined somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was about to poo-poo oil and gas development, but you're kind of like, you know, but everything I use has been mined somewhere.
Right.
And so you're sort of like, how do you balance well-managed exploitation of the environment against recreation access?
Right.
And that's what makes all this stuff so thorny. You know, I mean, this is,
right. Exactly. Thorny. Haha. That was funny. And I've never heard that one before, let me tell you.
Well, you know, I'm dad jokes in rare form today.
Right. So 2 things on that. Part of the reason we have such a narrow mission is because we are small, and because we are small, we have a narrow mission, if that makes sense. And so, you know, it's climbing access and then conservation of the climbing environment. We don't take a position on climate-related issues, for example. We might talk about the effect of wildfire on climbing areas, but we are not like a climate advocacy organization. We are a nonpartisan organization. And so our job, in the service of our mission, our job is to figure out how do we work with anybody and everybody who's in positions of power to be able to further our mission. Now, at times that might mean that, you know, we want to work with other partners who do have some sort of a mission in those other areas. But at the end of the day, like, if we want to be able to get a meeting with the Secretary of the Interior to talk about implementation of the Park Act, we actually need to be focused on our issue. And so that actually means that we don't oftentimes take positions on some of these things that are getting into this thorny area you're talking about. And an example of that is, for example, Oak Flat. So we have this 4-year-old lawsuit related to Oak Flat, and we've been involved in advocating to save Oak Flat for over 20 years. The issue there is not that mining itself is happening. We're not against mining. Like, mining can coexist with climbing. Mining is something that's necessary to produce the minerals, as you said, that we all use to have a cell phone or to drive an electric car or whatever.
And our laptops, yeah. I mean, it's like we're talking over a laptop. You're like, there you go.
The issue, though, is that we're saying, look, it's sort of a procedural issue. It's like how this came about. There was an agreement. There was they call it a midnight rider that was put into the National Defense Authorization Act in 2015. And it happened at midnight, and it was like a must-pass bill. And basically what that agreement would mean is that upon completion of an environmental impact survey for this Oak Flat, you know, which is a climbing area in central Arizona, upon completion of that EIS, the land would transfer over to Resolution Copper, which is a copper company that is jointly owned by Rio Tinto and another international company. Rio Tinto owns 55% of Resolution Copper and is, I think, majority shareholder is the Chinese government. And so our question is, number one, why are we handing over this, you know, treasure? And when I say treasure, I mean it's a natural treasure in terms of incredible like landscape and ecosystem and climbing. It used to be one of the world-class climbing areas, bouldering areas in the country. It used to have the largest bouldering competition in the world used to be there. But it's also a sacred native land for a number of tribes in the area. And the proposal, how they would actually mine this is they would use something called block caving, which essentially goes underground, creates these horizontal tunnels, and then blows up the whole area from below. Then the whole thing collapses, creates like a 1 to 2 mile wide crater. The entire area is destroyed. And so we're like, it's this question of like, why would this place be handed off to a foreign mining company. Basically, most of the workers would probably not be local workers based on what the reports show. And then all of this copper would get exported, most likely to China, and then re-imported with tariffs. Like, does that make sense? So we're fighting that because it's a climbing issue, but it's also you want to work to support the tribes. We climb a lot on native land, and having a healthy relationship with the tribes is really, really important. So that's why we're involved in that one. It's not because it's a mine. It's because of all these other factors.
And in some ways, that's a common sense kind of thing where you're like, this doesn't seem like it's the way the world should be. I mean, and there's so many things like that around public lands where you're like, it doesn't even make any sense. You're like, that's so crazy. And if you put that to voters, nobody would support that. But it's just that, like, a few people, for whatever reasons, did and managed to sneak it through, basically.
And I think they saw it as like a jobs thing at the time. I think the area is pretty economically depressed, and they saw this as a way to bring jobs. But the reality of it doesn't look like it's actually going to deliver a lot of local jobs. There are a million different things that we could take a position on or try to work on. We try to focus on those that meet certain criteria, that are like either setting a precedent that we see as a dangerous precedent for the things that we really care about as part of our mission, which is, conserving sustainable climbing access and conserving climbing landscapes.
I mean, that to me makes total sense, because if you're trying to get anything done, you focus on the one thing you're trying to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, particularly in a world where it feels like there's almost limitless things that you could care about or could work on.
Yeah.
You're sort of like, well, to actually do anything, you have to do the one thing that you're good at doing.
Right.
And do it well. What percentage of climbers do you think are participating in climbing access in some way?
The stats I have say that there are probably close to 1 million people that maybe climb outside, say more than like 8 times a year in any discipline, right? So if there's 1 million of those people, so think about like how many people do you think are members of Access Fund as a guess out of the like 1 million people?
I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, one right here probably fits as well.
Okay.
So I'm going to assume the three of us chatting right now. But I don't know. I mean, what percentage?
There's about 11,000 people.
Okay, so that's a very small percentage.
Out of like 1 million. Pretty small percentage. And then there are more, of course, I'm sure, who support LCOs that don't support Access Fund.
What do you say to people who aren't supporting, or like to those that don't know anything about it? I mean, what should people be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I want to be realistic. Like when somebody is early in their career, or they are, they have like a couple kids at home, they're super busy, they're just trying to get out and just like do the thing they love, right? Like I get it. They're busy, their resources are being consumed elsewhere. And so like, I can't assume that every single climber is going to be like putting resources towards supporting climbing. But what I would say is like, I like to try to create a mindset which says, if you ski, and if you go to a ski resort, I mean, what does it cost to go for a day? Like what's a lift ticket?
Like $450 or something, if you're going with your family, it's like insane.
Right. Like the cheapest ski lift, right? It's like $100. And literally like you could join Access Fund and support your local LCO for $100 a year. And that is like a membership level where, I mean, we recognize it with like a t-shirt and a sticker and all this other stuff, but it's like, it's just a solid level of support that says like, yeah, I care about climbing. I care about these climbing areas. And so what I try to say is like, think of it in the context of a day of skiing. Think of it in the context of like maybe a month of your gym membership.
Well, yeah, I was going to say nowadays like a day use. Like I just went to a gym in New York and paid $35. I was like, I just wanted to boulder for like an hour by myself. And I was like, wow, $35?
Exactly.
By that metric, it costs very little to support climbing at like a national level and the broader access.
Let me give you one other example. So think about how ski resorts operate. They get a lease from the U.S. Forest Service. And from what I understand, the amount of money that they pay to actually lease that land is really not very much. And I just like out of curiosity, I looked up like what does Vail Resorts generate in revenue? I think it was like $2.5 billion last year. And so they're like paying this little fee to lease the land, and then they are building some infrastructure, and then they are like earning billions of dollars on, people going to use that land. They're the gatekeeper to the vertical. And I think what's tricky with climbing is that unless you actually own the land and you have like a gate at the entrance and you charge people to go in, there's not really a way to sort of say like, hey, we are the ones providing this infrastructure for you. We're making sure it stays open. We're fighting to make sure that fixed anchors remain legal. All these things. Please just contribute a little bit. Like there's not really a way to do that. And so that's really the trick, is that we have to appeal to people's sense of like philanthropy and sort of long-term thinking and just like wanting to give back to this community that they derive so much from. So it really ends up being a lot about like educating and hoping that at some point people will wake up one day and be like, yeah, that really matters. Like I care about that and I derive so much joy from this experience that I want to get back to it.
Do you think people would just wake up someday? And I mean, I feel like in the last 30 years, have people woken up to that?
Well, I mean, the numbers aren't bigger, put it that way. So not necessarily. But I do think like the fact that LCOs themselves have grown so much, like there's so many more LCOs now and they have their own members. Like ideally, I would love it if, climbers that support an LCO also supported Access Fund. But if they just support the LCO, like that's okay too.
There's like a million people out there that are like climbers that like do this on the regular, right? There's 11,000 members of the Access Fund. That's a pretty big gap, right?
It's a really big gap.
Well, you call that a lot of room for
gap.
growth. That's a tremendous growth opportunity. Yeah.
I mean, like there's the classic phrase in Washington, D.C., like if you aren't at the table, you're on it.
Right.
Like what happens when we don't participate?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And that's where it gets to this question for me of like, what does it mean to be a member of Access Fund? Ideally, I would love every climber to actually join and like pay $100 to us and an LCO in their area, like support us financially. But in reality, like the single most important thing that climbers can do, I think, is pay attention. And like when there is an issue, and this is why we try to be really careful about not having an action alert about everything that happens, because frankly, right now you could have one once a week, twice a week. But like we have to try to pick the issues that are like really most important. But I think it really is like paying attention to when there is something where like, people are actually looking at where there's an uproar. If, public lands go up for sale and they get thousands and thousands and thousands of letters and they hear from constituents, like, okay, maybe we're not going to put that one in. And so I do think like that's the single most important thing climbers can do is that. And then I think it's also just like being aware of the issues in their area. And then if they can volunteer. I would love them to join Access Fund. Absolutely. I would love every single one of them too. But it's make your voices heard. I think that's the most important thing.
Who is Mark Udall?
Mark Udall is a former U.S. Senator from Colorado, though he actually started his career running Outward Bound, I believe, like guiding, like he was a full-on mountain climber. And then over the years began a career of public service, and basically in the later half of his life wound up as a U.S. Senator, which I think makes him the only person to do the Himalayas to Washington, D.C. link up.
That's a proud one.
Yeah, it's like not many people go from 8,000 meter peaks to the U.S. Senate. Actually, he is the only one. I mean, it's fair to say he's the only person who's done that. We'll be back with more after the break.
After the great gold rush on David bars, they are back in stock on David's website. Alex, when you go out for a big day or even a big morning like this morning, do you typically eat a David bar?
I normally eat David bars sort of on the hike out or when I get back to the car, sort of at the end of a gym session. I basically think of David as priming my recovery. And so they're a little bit different than other bars that, because other bars you eat during an activity to fuel you. I think of David bars as what you eat to recover.
Hit me with the stats that set David apart.
David bars have 28 grams of protein, but only 150 calories and 0 grams of sugar. So they have the highest ratio of protein to calories of anything on the market. Every batch is third-party tested to verify product integrity and safety, giving customers full confidence in what they're eating. After weeks of being sold out, David is officially back in stock on their website. They're offering our listeners a special deal. Buy 4 cartons and get the 5th one for free when you use davidprotein.com/climbinggold. Or if you prefer to shop in person, David is now in over 5,000 stores nationwide. Check out their store locator to find a location near you.
Dude, you ran up a mountain today, and I feel like it's like 1,000,000 degrees in Vegas.
Yeah, I did run up a mountain today. And actually, it's slightly less than 1,000,000 degrees today, but it is incredibly hot in the desert. And yeah, I have actually been drinking LMNT on every run. I've been trying to do one run a week and one mountain adventure week, and I always take LMNT in my water. I normally do 2 soft flasks, so 1 liter of water, and I split a pack of LMNT between the liter. And honestly, I think it's for the amount that I'm sweating in the desert, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a smart way to make sure that I don't bonk.
What flavor did you put in your bottle?
I use any flavor really, but I have been using the lemonade salt this summer. It was a seasonal flavor, though now it's just been made permanent, which is great.
Because it's the best. It's the best one for sure.
Yeah, but honestly, I think it's nice to mix them up because if you're using the same thing on every run, it starts to feel a little, I don't know. It's just nice to have different flavors. Get a free 8-count sample pack of LMNT's most popular drink mix flavors with any purchase at drinklmnt.com/climbinggold. That's drinklmnt.com/climbinggold. Find your favorite LMNT flavor or share it with a friend.
So my name's Mark Udall. I live in El Dorado Canyon, just south of Boulder, Colorado. I grew up in Southern Arizona. I'm now retired, which means I get up every morning, make a great cup of coffee, and then figure out what I'm going to do. And I had two very different careers. I was a mountain guide for years. I ended up getting sucked into management. And after about 10 years in the field at Outward Bound, I ended up being the CEO of the Outward Bound school. But I had also grown up in a family where public service was really a focus. And I had great examples. My father, my uncle, my grandfather had all served in elective office. And in my mid-40s, I decided I wanted to move on to another adventure, if you will. I went into the world of politics, and I served in the state legislature in Colorado for one term, and then I served in the United States House for 5 terms, that is 10 years. And then had a chance to serve in the United States Senate from 2009 to 2015. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately from some points of view, the voters fired me in the election of 2014. And in many respects, it gave me another chapter in my life where I've continued to climb, ski, and particularly I've gotten very interested like in the ocean. So I've been doing a lot of sea kayaking down in Baja California, paddles from 8 to 20 days along that 900-mile stretch of coast on the inside of Baja California, where the wind and the sun are always hunting you. But I love living outside.
It's a pretty big jump to go from running Outward Bound to being a U.S. senator. How did that feel? Like, how's that transition?
It was. My son said to me, he said, "Dad, I don't get you. First, you made your living climbing mountains, which is really dangerous." He said, "You went into politics. That's super dangerous." So emotionally, I think being in the world of politics and public service is almost more challenging. The team that you're on in any kind of climbing situation, you can't schmooze your way up a mountain. You can't trash talk your way up a mountain. You don't get to cut the rope when one of your partners is having a bad day.
At least it's strongly discouraged anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I want to take a few steps back though. So how did you start climbing?
My mother had grown up basically in Rocky Mountain National Park, and she was a climber, an angler, an equestrian, and she just got us outdoors from the get-go. I'm so thankful to her. My dad also supported that. He'd grown up in northeastern Arizona in a small Mormon community and had a real connection to the outdoors. My younger brother and his comparable cousin had been climbing in Yosemite when they were 14, 15, and 16. So here I am, a 17, 18, 19-year-old. My 15-year-old brother's taken me out rock climbing, and it just made sense. Used to say, if you're a rock climber, you don't need a shrink. You don't need a therapist, because when you're climbing, the past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. You're just in the present. All of that background noise in your head is blown away, and you're focused. And it made sense to me in a world that maybe mirrors what's happening right now. We had the Vietnam War. We had these assassinations that really tore the nation apart. We had race riots, but we also had all this hope too out of the Kennedy era, of feeling like maybe our country could move in a significant way towards meeting the goal of and the promise of the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. But I think from like many of my people, my generation, I felt a certain despair, what is the meaning of being here? And for me, climbing became a fountainhead, became a way to make sense of the world, a way to find my best self. Yeah.
I'm not positive, but I'm going to assume that you're the best climber in the U.S. Senate of all time. That's probably true, right? And so I'm curious what kind of benchmark you set for the Senate. Like what is considered hardcore sending at the level of U.S. government? I was said when they described me that way. That's like saying I was the best surfer in Nebraska. Well, it's something.
Well, I had a wonderful couple of years set of successes where I climbed the Messner route on the south face of Aconcagua.
Wait, that's the really, really big, that's the giant face on Aconcagua, right?
Giant face.
Oh, wow.
And it is everything from 5'8", 5'9" rotten rock climbing to a steep ice cliff to mixed climbing. I think probably somebody's done it now in a day or 2 days. I think it took us 7 or 8 nights.
Actually, I think some of that stuff on the South Face now is just like a death route now, because it's not really in condition. And it's all melted and it's all crumbling. Yeah, the snow and ice is holding all that volcanic rock that in place. All the choss together, all the
beyond chassis. And then a year later, I soloed the southwest face of Kanchenjunga, not an intentional solo, but climbed to the summit on the day my partner ran out of steam. So I climbed the third highest peak in the world and reached the summit late in the day, 24-hour climb. I've never been more exhausted, but more elated than when we got back to our high camp 24 hours later. And I'd tell you, when I was on that summit at Kanchenjunga, I didn't feel like I'd conquered anything. I was like, what the hell am I doing up here? I've got 2 children. How the hell do I get down? You know, the euphoria of the heights is real, but the reality also of being there in probably the highest human on the planet that particular day. A year later, I'd attempted the Cassine on the south face of Denali in 1980, and we had retreated for any number of reasons, but went back and climbed the Cassine again in a 6-day alpine style ascent.
Wow.
And those are all my late 30s, early 40s. And those 3 test pieces, now I don't think they'd ever be considered casual, but at the time that was not hanging it out. Those were serious commitments.
I mean, I think 40 years later, those still aren't easy. You know, all 3 of those, you're like, oh wow, that's a big day. Like that's some real climbing.
Yeah,
like, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's pretty proud.
It's a bit of tongue in cheek, but there's some truth to it. The other thing I'm most proud of is of the close to 24 expeditions I went on. With one exception, we came back, all of us in one piece, all of us friends. One expedition, we did lose one member to pulmonary edema, and another one we came back and 2 of the 4 members of the team sued each other in small claims court. But other than that, I have friendships that to this day are important. And I may have not seen anybody. I'm sure, Alex, you've had this experience where seen somebody in 7 or 8 or 10 years, but the minute we get together, we're like that again because of the shared experiences, the shared risk. Us climbers, we have a kind of a combination of arrogance and humility, but we cheated death together, and it's hard to find those in everyday life and in everyday vocations.
Mm-hmm. Was climbing something you were able to continue as you entered public service and you had a career in government? I mean, it seems like climbing just takes a lot of time. And were you able to climb?
I was able to continue to do a bit of rock climbing, living near El Dorado Canyon. Of course, you could slip out and get an afternoon in. I continued to climb, but I was able to keep my hand in, if you will, but it was in August when the Congress would take a long recess. And by the way, it didn't hurt that I represented Colorado, where there was an expectation that I embraced and role modeled that commitment and connection to the outdoors, but not like I did from my early 20s through my mid 40s, where I was going on a major expedition every couple of years, and every weekend I was out, depending on the season, being active, skiing, climbing, kayaking, doing all those kind of things. Yeah,
it's interesting to hear you talk about your introduction to climbing, because through Climbing Gold, we've interviewed tons of climbers of different generations. And your experience actually seems fairly characteristic of your generation, where being a climber meant being an outdoors person, meant, fishing, hunting, backpacking, whatever, like basically getting out and doing things. And then climbing was an extension of doing things outdoors. Whereas now when we interview younger climbers, I mean, typically climbing means accessing a climbing gym and then becoming a rock climber, more high performance, sort of like elite gymnastics, like a physical act. But I think it's pretty common of your time that climbing to you meant big expeditions, climbing mountains, camping, just like a lot of time outdoors. And I can see how in a lot of ways that's an easier thing to maintain through your career, both at Outward Bound and in politics, because it just doesn't require high performance. So you don't have to be training. You don't have to be sending super hard. It doesn't matter what the conditions are like. You're just going outside and having an experience.
Yeah, no, well put, Alex. And I'm in awe of what your generation has done. And I wouldn't be totally honest if I didn't say occasionally I have some feelings of jealousy of the training regimes that are now in place and the increases in technique. We just went out probably having overconsumed the night before or whatever.
Were there specific lessons from the outdoors that you felt like applied to your career in public service?
We all have politics in our lives. Politics is just the process of making a decision or decisions about what a group of people are going to do. You get 4 of you wanting to go to a movie or go have a meal, or what are we going to go climb tomorrow? Or what basin are we going to go ski in? Making that decision, that's a form of politics. It's human It's the human condition.
So you're saying that, so last night, my wife and I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out where we're going to climb this week and which days we're going to which crags and who's going out. And so what you're saying is that we're actually training for politics.
You are.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah. My next, and you said you didn't get involved in public service until your mid 40s. So I turned 40 this year. I'm like, I don't know. Is this the next decade? Is this the next chapter?
You'd start out with a really interesting profile. And, I led a number of expeditions to the Himalayas, the 9 expeditions I took part there, and ones to South America and Alaska. And those leadership roles, teach you a lot about politics and a lot of the basics that are involved in making a decision. Say you've got one of the larger expeditions I led to the Cho-Yu, the 6th highest peak in the world. There were about 10 of us. We had our Sherpa team, and I'm making decisions on an ongoing basis about where we're going to camp, who's going to be out front, on and on. Logistics. You get in a tough situation, bad weather comes in, you've got an issue with one of your teammates, the route suddenly becomes unclear. The old, hey, let's stop, let's brew a cup of tea, let's take some deep breaths, let's not overreact, let's be calm, assess all that's going on. I took that into the political world. I think sometimes I could be inscrutable to some people who spent their entire lives in elective office because I didn't rant and rave. I was more of a listener than a talker. Power of example. Your actions speak more loudly than your words was one I carried into the world of public service. And in some ways, that kind of decision making applies across the board, whether you're serving in the Congress, running a little company, or deciding where to go for the coming weekend with one of your climbing partners.
After 20 years with Outward Bound and all these incredible climbing expeditions, why make the pivot back to politics? I mean, I know you had the family connection. I mean, I know that public service runs deep, but still, it's just so boring compared to sending in the big mountains. It's like, I mean, how do you pivot back?
It was a combination of, I was aging a bit, looking for other challenges. I was trying to take the Outward Bound mindset of you can find adventure, which involves risk in every part of your life. Having a family is very risky. Starting a business it's a form of adventure and risk. And I thought, well, I ought to be Outward Bound in my own life. I ought to get out of my comfort zone. And that combined with the fact I had a family, needed to provide for them. And then I had these wonderful role models of my dad and then on my mother's side, her brother, her father. And then there was this feeling of, in order to build my self-respect, I had to dedicate myself to a cause greater than my own self-interest. It was a way to stay curious. And I got to be curious on the behalf of, in the end, all 5 million Coloradans, and do what I could do to protect and preserve and enhance and nurture our way of life here in Colorado. I know that sounds maybe a little idealistic, but I'm idealistic.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I want to talk to you about is just public lands. I did a little press conference thing outside Red Rock with my congresswoman, Representative Susie Lee. She represents my district, but she represents Red Rock. And she just wanted to do a little press thing talking about the importance of the Explore Act that recently passed, and then the Park Act and the Bolt Act, whatever. She's really into mountain biking, so she really cared about I think it's the Bolt, the biking long distance trails thing.
Yes.
It was interesting talking to her and then doing some research about the Explore Act. In general, it seems like everybody supports outdoor recreation.
Yes.
And I mean, that bill passed unanimously, I think, in the Senate. I mean, does anything pass unanimously anymore? I was like, oh, that seems like a rarity. And so basically, I just want to hear your take on the Explore Act and public lands and how we protect public lands and what are your thoughts?
We have to have more voices to protect our public lands, to protect these ways of life that are so important to us. And being a U.S. congressman, being a U.S. senator, you have some clout, you have some power. Some of it's positional, some of it's advocacy based, but some of it's your vote and being able to move policies forward that are going to protect this marvelous portfolio we have of public lands in the context of there always from the get-go been other forces and other interests, mostly economics. I would say a number of them based in greed that we've always had to stand up to. And by the way, it's disturbing to me, but we got to keep battling. The party of Teddy Roosevelt seem hell-bent, at least some members of the party, on giving away the public lands, of generating activities in the public lands that are solely about economic gain for a limited number of people.
There's a story, and I'm not sure if this is apocryphal or if this is a real thing, but that you were halfway up the diamond, climbing the diamond, when you realized that Rocky Mountain National Park should have a wider area of wilderness protected around it. Is that a real story? Is that a real thing?
So my brother and I, and again, you mentioned he was quite a climber at the age of 12 and 13 and 14. And in the mid 70s, he said, hey, we should go do D1 on the Diamond. Now, again, I'm sure people are climbing that in 4 or 5 hours or maybe even more quickly. But, we bivouacked on Table Ledge. And I think we couldn't literally flip a coin, but we did, paper, scissors, rock, to figure out who got to sleep on the outside of the ledge or who was forced to sleep on the outside of the ledge.
I just can't imagine bivvying on the Diamond. I think of the Diamond as kind of like a mini wall compared to Real Bear. I'm like, oh, wow, you guys camped on the Diamond in the 70s. That's so extreme.
That's true. I think on the way up, I'd run into a fellow wilderness advocate saying, much of this park isn't protected. And there's overlapping elements to the way BLM lands, Forest Service lands, Park Service lands are managed, and people assume the national parks are fully protected, and that isn't the case. I don't know if you've been following Kevin Fedarko and Pete McBride's great work, A Walk Through the Park, and pointing out the Grand Canyon seems like it's not subject to any environmental degradation or environmental threats, and in fact, there are many there. But this conversation with these areas aren't protected, could be open to development, could be open to helicopter overflights. The list starts to grow, and the planted a seed. I thought to myself, if I ever was to serve, this would be on high on my list of get wilderness protection for Rocky Mountain National Park, and I was able to do so through a bill that also protected further the James Peak Wilderness, which is just south of the park. At any rate, I was really pleased we were able to get that done. I'm not sure I've answered your question.
No, I was just curious the story. I mean, it's such a classic, climber does right kind of story where you're up on the Diamond, you're like, this should be protected someday, and then one day it actually gets protected. I think one sort of and it's not as if you single-handedly did that, because obviously that's always the work of tons of people, but in a way, one protected area like that, like one designation of wilderness or whatever, can really stand as a legacy where you're like, oh, I've protected one massive forest, because at a certain point, you're kind of like, man, if any one human can look at a huge swath of wild land and think I have protected that place, you can kind of die happy. You're like, great, like that is at least one small part of the earth that is better off because I put some effort in. I mean, do you feel that way? I mean, is that?
I do feel that way, and I'm well aware of the team we put together and some of the previous work on former elected officials that had held the offices I held. Yeah, I can die happy. I mean, I'm not.
You're not quite ready yet, but.
Yeah, but I will die happy that we got some important things done, and we kept faith with the future generations that are coming. We kept the covenant that is part of our public lands, frankly. And it's almost like each generation, your generation, Alex, we'd like to know the lands are all protected, but only one time do we lose that protection. And then things dramatically change. Those lands aren't just going to be protected because we wish it to be so. We're going to have to continually defend them.
I'm kind of curious. I feel like there are often moments where we think, I'm just a climber. What can I do about that? When you look around a wilderness and you're like, well, I'm just a climber. What could I do? Yeah. But then some people realize that they're not just a climber, that they can do something about it. And I'm thinking of people like Doug Tompkins or Yvonne Chenard, who, are climbers who have made tremendous strides in conservation, or even before that, people like David Brower or John Muir. Did you have any kind of sudden realization like that, or is that just going back to the family history of public service?
Yeah, it was more woven into me, the combination of my mom's love of the outdoors and then my father and uncle's example, and then my own experiences and the insights and the soul-inspiring experiences I had, and the importance of being able to test yourself in the outdoors, and the opportunity to learn how to be a leader, but also to be a follower, and those really basic lessons that the outdoors teach us that in some ways go right to who we are as humans. We didn't evolve in these big cities, right? And
we didn't evolve in the U.S. Senate, that's for sure.
That's for sure. And I think being in the outdoors gives you a chance to get back in touch with that and then apply those lessons to these broader societal groups and these broader societal challenges. And so I want those experiences to be available going forward, because I think they're just really crucial. So I see it as almost a basic human need to be in touch with the natural world, common to all of us, regardless of the color of our skin, the ways in which we're diverse as human beings.
What do you think of the state of public lands in the U.S., though, particularly with the new administration coming into office? Like, where do we stand for public lands right now?
We're in a situation now we got to play defense. And we also have to call on, if not the better angels, the economic interests in some of the economies and in many of these small communities and in the major communities in the states of the Rockies are going to be affected negatively. And some of it, as you know, is posturing. I mean, the state of Utah is always, in Wyoming now, they sue the federal government for the federal government to give back the lands the public lands that we own as the people of the United States. There's going to be a lot of action in the courts. The Antiquities Act is going to be threatened again. I have no doubt.
So I live in the state of Nevada, which is 80% federal land. It's like all public land.
Right.
And so when you drive across Nevada, it feels like just the vast unknown, the vast openness. And you're just like, oh, it's all open. And interestingly, when you drive across, say, Texas, it feels that way also, where you're like, oh, it's vast nothingness, except that Texas is 100% privately owned.
Yeah.
And literally none of it is open for you to just wander around and have adventures. Like you will get shot, like you're on somebody's ranch and you are trespassing. And I think that that's an important distinction for the casual listener, that a lot of what seems like open land, sometimes it's owned by an individual, sometimes it's owned by the federal government, which means that it's owned by all of us. And that's a very important distinction between the two, because living in Nevada, you can literally go anywhere and do anything whenever you want. It's like so chill. You can have the craziest adventures all the time. And then in so many other parts of the country, even though it looks like, there are no buildings on the land, but the land is still not available to the average person to have an experience.
I love what you're saying in the sense of you're educating the listeners.
Well, that's one of the things actually I think it's important, because I think when the two of us have a conversation about public lands, I think the average climber nowadays doesn't even necessarily know the difference between the Bureau of Land Management, the Forest Service, the National Park Service. They don't know which part of the federal government protects those. They don't know the difference between those in a state park or, private land holding. And I think it's easy for climbers to just take those for granted, like just take land access as a normal thing. Like, oh, you walk to the cliff, you go climb, like those boulders are sitting over there and you just go climb on them. And you don't necessarily know who owns the land or who protects it or why. You just go climbing because you can.
It's not like it takes a huge amount of your time or energy to vote. I think that's the number one job. So maybe send $25 to the local climbing organization, be involved with the Access Fund and educate yourself. But it's going to take leaders and advocates like yourself. I think, you're the future, I'm the past. I think there's a long way to go, but real change in 40 years ago, the climbing world, the kayaking world, the skiing world, we were all into ourselves, if you will, for the most part, just assuming things would continue to be the way they were. And some of that was also that old saying about it in the at either end of the economic spectrum, there's a leisure class.
Yeah, the leisure class. Yeah. I think the climbing world has really shifted from one end of the spectrum to the other, I think.
When I went up to the POW rendezvous, I think a couple of years ago, BV, Buena Vista here in Colorado, I didn't see anybody climbing into the dumpsters like we used to do in Yosemite. I know United States Senators shouldn't talk that way. And I sure saw a lot more sprinters than I did old Volkswagen vans.
Yeah, for sure.
But that slight increase in economic status and economic access could also play into being stronger advocates of our public lands.
Something that I find confusing about public lands debates and like public land issues in the U.S. is that public lands are overwhelmingly supported by people. Individuals always vote to protect lands. Individuals love national parks.
Yeah.
Basically, Americans love the Wild West, and like protecting nature and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so why is it that it's such a deeply divisive political issue? Like, why is there so much conflict around public lands when the vast majority of people, if put to a poll, like always support public lands?
I wish I had a quick, insightful answer of which we could operate.
Well, give us a messy muddle then, if that's, it's politics. So I'm ready for a bunch of mud and like a, deep wallowing. Well, I mean, is it fair to say that it is just like extractivist industries, like it's oil and gas, it's mining, it's it's industry, it's whatever. I mean, is it relatively simple like that, or is it just like far more complex and I just don't understand?
In a way, you'd think I wouldn't have to be reminded of my experience dealing with those strong lobbies and points of view. And you're right, there's a little bit of a sleight of hand going on here with certain politicians and certain public officials. Oh yeah, we love our public lands, and I was out hunting last week, or you don't hear as much from most politicians on the muscle powered side of the equation, right? It's I was on my snowmobile or I was on my trail bike, and I've had to let go of some of my purest inclinations when I was younger. But those are one set of activities. But then the really activities that really have enormous effect on public lands, oil and gas drilling, of course, logging, mining, some of the traditional industries. And there is a quiet, in some cases not so quiet, financial support. And this gets to the whole world of fundraising in our political system. And it's not blatant. And I even hate to use the word because it sort of eats at me, but it's not blatant corruption, but it's this sort of quiet, ongoing access that those industries have because of the money they put into the system that results in some of what you're describing. And then that's why we have to be willing to advocate and be strong voices, use the courts when necessary. And it's why elections matter, because you also have a number of people in the federal Congress who stop some of these really bad ideas from taking hold. I tend to be a Pollyanna.
Is that when you foresee doom? What's Pollyanna do?
Pollyanna, no, that's like, everything's going to turn out just fine.
Oh, that's the opposite. You're foreseeing rainbows and ponies. Oh, that's great. I love ponies. Yeah. That's cool. So in regards to public lands again, I mean, do you think that the long-term potential for public lands is actually, it's like maybe it's going to be better off in the future as we transition away from certain types of extractive industries? It's like, because certainly within my lifetime, I'm pretty sure I'm going to see the fossil fuel industry pretty much disappear, or like basically become the plastics industry instead.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, we're just not going to be burning fossil fuels for fuel. We're going to be, we're going to be converting them into plastic and doing other things with them. And it's like, obviously it's still going to exist to some extent, but it's just not going to be the driver that it is right now.
Yeah.
What don't you think? I mean, to me, that seems clear. I mean, right now, solar is the cheapest power on Earth, and you're kind of like, it's hard to argue with economics for very long. It's like eventually you just go solar because it's cheaper.
Yeah, there's that old saying about democracy being the worst form of government.
Yeah, exactly.
Except for all the other forms of government.
We're going to test that.
We're going to test that. Then you could apply it to capitalism. Capitalism is the worst damn economic system in the world, except for all the other economic systems. But capitalism itself has, I believe, and you're right in the middle of this, it has to also evolve so that it has more bottom lines than just a P&L. And we're seeing that happening, whether it'll be fast enough to prevent some of these dire predictions from coming true. We'll see. But your point about market forces is really well taken. And maybe our public lands get a break, if you will, in the next 20 or 30 years as we move away from fossil fuels.
That's the thing that I wonder is, like, I wonder if one of the ways to protect public lands is just to take some of the pressure off, extractive industries and basically just make them. I mean, that's the beauty of going solar, going renewable, things like that, is that there's just never going to be a market for fossil fuels in the future. It's like, it's just slowly going to disappear.
One of the things people say, hey, well, how do I make a difference? We were talking about this. And I do think in order to save the world, you save yourself first. Don't get overwhelmed with guilt. Look at what you can do. And I think some of the small steps, they have to add up. And I know some would say, okay, again, Mark, you're being a Pollyanna here, and we need systemic change, and we need a federal government that's really pushing us more quickly forward. But in so doing, you also get a feeling of, hey, I'm not totally beholden, or I'm not totally at the mercy of the system. And as consumers, we have some power. It's a little bit like people say, well, my vote doesn't matter. Well, yeah, your vote does not matter. But if you add your vote to another vote, you get 2, and you take those 2 and add those 2, you get 4, and you get an exponential. Whether they'll add up fast enough to where your children have the kind of future and opportunities is yet to be seen. But what did Michelle Obama say? She said, do something this summer. And I know for her, easy to say in a way, but I think it was heartfelt. And it's one of my mantras.
That's actually one of my sort of go-to things as well. It's like, well, just do something that you care about, something that you can do well. Like, what's the thing that you're uniquely suited to do? What's the thing that you're passionate about? Like, whatever, but just do something and do it well. What do you think is, what's your one takeaway for climbers right now with regard to public lands and the current political climate? And like, what should people be mindful of? I'm wishing I had a killer app for people, but I'd say, look, your vote counts. The people who represent you and then oversee our public lands are important. There are organizations that need your support and help financially and here and there time-wise. And take a break
from the news and go out and climb, go out and use our public lands, keep that connection going. And then finally, in your broader circle, whether it's your parents, your aunts and uncles, your cousins, educate them about the value of our public lands and the importance of having access to public lands. Even for a more casual user, there's something special and important and nurturing about being able to go for a walk, which I'll do later today up in the open space in Boulder.
Yeah, it's like going hiking with your family. It's like still having a nice experience in nature. And you're like, anyone can enjoy that.
I don't know how it's all going to turn out, but it matters that people stay involved. That was certainly what I've seen through settling my 70 plus years on the planet.
Thank you, Heather and Mark, for sitting down and taking the time to share your perspective on public lands. There's a link to the Access Fund in the show notes. Let's see if we can close that membership gap. People ask if there are ways that they can help Climbing Gold, and we love that. One big thing you can do is write us up a review on whatever podcast platform you listen to. It helps people find us. It keeps us in your feed. It's super helpful, and it works. It's a small thing, so thank you. Climbing Gold is created by Duct Tape Then Beer. Alex Honnold is our host. Our production team includes the talents of Skylar Perwins, Marco Seiler Gonzalez, and Evan Phillips. Our creative director is me, Fitz Cahal. Today's music by Graham Barton, TC in the Mix, Brian Harvey, David Swenson, Juha Pekalina, Padelm, and Brendan O'Connell. Will Taylor handles our ad sales. Our executive producers are Jonathan Retzik and Ben Endy for RXR Sports, and Lacey Hendricks and Becca Cahal for Duct Tape Then Beer. Thanks for listening.